Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Phantom Nebula Radio. We are the home of the unexplained, the mysterious, the extraterrestrial, and more. Tonight's episode is actually going to be about the collapse of civilization, particularly America, however, because as we know, in America, that there has become dire straits in the past few decades. We have let ourselves become controlled by a system that has thrown us overboard decades ago. We have traded liberty for security. We have pretty much let them give us bread and circuses, turning our money into literally almost nothing. It's just paper, and it only works because we think it works. We've become almost destroying our culture. I read a book quite a few years back, and it talked about how there was a list of things explaining what happens when an empire or a civilization, I guess, they go hand in hand, I suppose, will collapse. One of the reasons was they find their culture not worth saving. And I suppose that this will happen for America as we continue to bastardize our culture. We continue to we continue to let ourselves be divided by simple things like smoke and mirrors, as if you have a choice between Democrat and Republican. Let them continuously dumb us down by lowering the standardized test rates, making so everybody will pass no matter, even if you've learned the curriculum or not. The American education system became more about memorizing than actually learning it. But they've increased higher learning costs, so it's almost impossible to get a higher education. And even then, our standards of education, even at college level, are not up to par with the rest of the world. But I digress. Tonight, we're gonna pretty much serve as a warning to everyone across the world, or to whoever's listening, who's listening to me sitting here in the stank, toxic state of New Jersey, that the end could be coming. No, not the end of the world. That would be taken care of by some sort of other natural disaster or something. No, this is the end of the world that you see in front of you. Having cars, being able to not worry about where your food comes from, just going to the store and buying it. Quick access to medical supplies, antibiotics, hospitals, somewhat well-trained doctors. What happens if you get that your entire life? Some people, I guess myself included, that rely on electronics, completely upside down. What would happen? That's our method of discussion tonight. I will reiterate it in the past, but I'll reiterate it now. On here, we do not judge you based on political opinions, whether you swing right, swing left, or decide to stay in the middle. We do not judge you based on if you've had a paranormal or extraterrestrial experience. So if you're welcome to call us, and you're welcome to share your opinion, whatever it may be, or you're welcome to come and just chat with us. Tell us how you feel. Anything that's on your mind, you're welcome to just check us out and call in. The call-in number is 714-364-4734. And you can call in whatever you like, and these are completely unscreened calls, meaning that we do not have a call screener. We do not have someone that comes in and will sit you to the side and tell you, oh, no, that's too crazy for here, or this is that, and that is this, and no, I'm sorry, we can't take your call. None of that will happen. You're welcome to call whenever you would like and talk about whatever you would like, if it pertains to something that we cover. We don't talk about sports here. We don't talk about just random pop culture, like who won American Idol. No, we talk about the important stuff here. We talk about politics, as you see tonight. We talk about the unexplained, mysterious, extraterrestrial. Whatever's on your mind. So you can just give us a call, and you can talk with me or Miguel, will be calling in shortly, so we can continue the discussion. But I'll give you a small taste of some of the topics that we'll be talking about. We're going to talk about how America will most likely collapse by 2025. There's 4 scenarios that could spell the end of the United States as we know it in the very near future. We're talking about what happens in a societal collapse and what has happened in previous societal collapses, depending on if it was a quick societal collapse like Mayan, or it was like a gradual decline of a superpower like the Roman Empire. So this topic kind of like branches everything: anthropology, history, sociology, politics, everything that you can think of. We're going to be talking about the 5 stages of collapse and what would happen afterwards. We're going to be giving you tips onto how to survive in the coming collapse. I know it. The sad part is that I enjoy this comfy life. I mean, but unfortunately, I know that with the rapid spending that's gone on, and it's not sustainable. We live in an unsustainable system. The first mistake was that we completely let ourselves be fooled by a 2-party system. A 2-party system can never ever work because we're so split down the middle. But unfortunately, not a lot of other countries have any other success, because as you can see in other countries, give me an example, like India, they've had entire parties just walk out. and that's a problem. So unfortunately, I'm just going around in circles, and I'm going to get back to where our topic is. What would you do if you woke up one day and you went to look on the news and the government was more than just like a regular shutdown, not like this one that we're talking about just coming up now, which is ridiculous. It's okay to disagree with what's being passed, but to shut down the government and deny people with paychecks and jobs. Of course, senators and presidents will get the president will get their paychecks, but there are people in the Park Service and the National Library. Let me just go through the list about some of the facts of this shutdown. Fortunately, it won't affect the military veterans because they did decide that they will support certain things, such as the soldiers abroad. So they will actually get paid. But it's a hard topic to talk about without trying to sound one-sided. But unfortunately, I am one-sided. I know that this government has become so corrupt. So all of this is just a smoke and mirrors game. So, with no further ado, I will stop bantering and running around in circles. I'm sure I'm boring all of you, and we'll say hello to my host again, as usual. Miguel, welcome again.
Hey, what's going on, Pete? Sorry about that. Got stuck in automotive class. I tried to hurry up as fast as I can to get back.
It's okay. I regaled them with me going in circles and acting like a chicken without my head cut off, and I teased a little bit about tonight, told them where we were going to go, and it sounded a little disjointed, so unfortunately I hope it didn't bore people too much to just jump ship, and hopefully they'll continue to listen to us. Explain to them again, and I guess I'll explain now that we have pretty much unscreened open lines. You're welcome to call at any time. You're welcome to comment on what we're currently discussing on the show. You're welcome to share your story about anything that's happened to you that you find weird or unexplainable, whether it be an alien abduction, a sighting of Bigfoot, a haunting, anything that you think is important. We don't judge whether what we think is important or less important. So, Miguel, I'll pose this question to you, actually. The same question I posed to the rest of the audience. What would you do if you woke up and it was almost like Nazi Germany not Nazi Germany, if it was during, say, the 30s, you woke up, your money was useless. You woke up and you had to take a wheelbarrow to go buy bread. You woke up and there was nothing being shipped to the supermarkets because gas was so pricey that nothing could be shipped to the supermarkets. And on top of that, the money's worthless. The government shut down, enacted martial law, or et cetera, et cetera. And there's mass looting and rioting in the streets, and people were, freaking out, and people were just leaving hospitals and leaving patients in the hospitals. It's a very scary situation. So, just to start off, what would you even do? I mean, that was just...
Well, me, as, personally, we've actually kind of answered this last time when, our last show regarding, I shouldn't say last show, but a couple seasons ago, actually. I'm actually very fortunate enough that my girlfriend's family is a very self-sustaining, has a very self-sustaining piece of property and family. Honestly, if something like that were to happen, that would be the first place I would go. If you haven't listened, prior, and and I haven't talked over this with you guys. My girlfriend lives up near Carbondale in Pennsylvania. Her family has a pretty large farm with it's not only a produce farm, it's also a dairy farm as well. They, everything they do is almost everything there is produced locally, except for electricity. But besides that, they produce heat themselves. They produce their own food. They have a well. They have a massive stockpile of firearms. It's a very large, very rural, hilly piece of property. Plenty of all sorts of vehicles should they need to evacuate or rise. And honestly, I mean, if something like that were to happen, I would be assuming I could make it out there without being without being caught.
That's the thing though. Like, how would you make it out there? Because think about it. We live in New Jersey, and
it's a very densely populated area. People will be everyone will be trying to rush out of here.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm saying. It would be very difficult. But my only survivable option would be to try to make it out there somehow.
Well, of course, yeah. That's the best bet is to get out of here. But the thing is, think about it. Everyone's gonna be slamming the gas pumps. Everyone's going to be running to the supermarket. The only ways out of New Jersey, and you can correct me if I actually do mess this up and not say it correctly, or I'm wrong. But to get out to Pennsylvania, the only way is across the bridges, correct?
Well, I'm trying to think. I believe. Yeah. Actually, to get out there, I usually cross up north, across the Delaware Water Gap up there. So yeah, you do have to cross the Delaware River in order to get over there.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I'm trying to get at.
The major issue right there.
Well, you would get to the bridge and it would be just packed, and I don't think you can ford the Delaware River very easily.
Well, actually, if you don't mind, in a little while, I would actually just like to recollect on my own experiences on, I shouldn't say societal collapse, but societal disorder following Superstorm Sandy in my town.
Oh, I actually, the thing about it is, now that you mention that, is that I worked. Well, that was when I worked in EMS at the time, and that's actually, I didn't even think about it. That Hurricane Sandy would be something we could talk about now, because I remember. Actually, now that I talk now, we'll get to it in a little bit, so we can actually talk about Sandy later down the line, because that could actually take us a while because of how crazy it got at that point, and actually it did feel like the world was collapsing.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the stages of collapse, just so I can tell people kind of how, just so you'll know maybe how a collapse might happen. So this is your weapon. Knowledge is a weapon, and knowledge is power. So this is going to be putting power and a weapon in your hands, not a theoretical mind weapon. So, all right, the time frame is that there is, according to this article, is that a financial collapse is occurring now. Other forms of collapse are also in motion. The other stages. They could be separated by months, years, weeks, days, hours, and they could happen all at the same time. It's just that we're separating them into 5 stages just to better understand it. A financial collapse is when credit completely collapses. The government is bailing out the banks and everything else, and borrowing more and more and more and more and more just to keep from falling out. Actually, a good metaphor for this would be a treadmill. Put it in your mind, what would you feel if you went to the gym, got on a treadmill, and just punching at the speed as high as it'll go? What happens is if you trip yourself and you fall and you keep flying backwards. That's the government's lending thing during this kind of financial collapse. But who are we borrowing this from? People tell you we're borrowing it from the taxpayer. But it's not like how, just automatically shot up by $3 trillion in the past couple of months. Who's the taxpayer borrowing this from? From other Americans? No, because our savings rate has always been this low. They have to be financed by foreigners. What if they decide not to trust us anymore? Then we are boned. Then our only option is to monetize the debt, print more money. So the more you print money, and the more and more and more more money becomes completely, absolutely worthless, except for toilet paper, but you would not want to wipe your butt with a dollar bill because it's dirty. Okay, once all the expenses become irrelevant because there's nothing behind them, faith in business is lost. The future can no longer be assumed to resemble the past. Risk can no longer be assessed, and assets can no longer be guaranteed. Financial institutions have become none, nil, zip, nothing. Savings are gone, and access to money is lost. There's hyperinflation, pennies on the dollar is what your stuff is worth. You start to see people bartering with things that aren't cash, squatting, stuff like that. That's it. And there's commercial collapse, which means that products are scarce. It becomes a self-service economy. It means you can only help yourself and you can only count on yourself. You got to scrounge. If I do compare before and after, one would be a shopping mall, one would be a flea market. So hold on. Whoa. That almost had a technical difficulty. Almost. My laptop decided to completely zoom in and then completely zoom out, so I couldn't read what I was talking about. So, and then you get to political collapse. Politicians are really, really good at maintaining power and authority, even as it dwindles. The reason why you really can't see a political spot is that the worse things get, the more noise they make. So, as that starts to unravel, local politics will become more important because they're less accessible than remote bureaucrats, and they were the first to be overwhelmed by anger and confusion of us. The thing is, this is where you start to see the dangerous stuff happens. You get to start to see police possibly just disappearing and going away. You start to see rogue militias. You possibly see martial law, crumbling infrastructure, and just disaster. And then you have the two biggest ones where everything just takes a giant dump: social and cultural collapse. Before, it was solidarity and mutual aid and diversity and all this great, happy stuff, and then it becomes every man for himself, confrontation, roaming gangs, and suspicion. And then culture collapse. Who gives a shit about culture when you have no survival? Who cares about culture when you have nothing to practice it on? But now that long-winded thing is over. But like I said, knowledge is power, and knowing what to expect can provide you with a peace of mind, even if this is coming. So now that I decided that I just kind of thing, what do you think, Miguel, of that article? What do you think of how they think everything's going to fall down? And the scariest part about it, at least that I feel, is that it could all happen all at once or in really short time span.
Which one was this? Hold on one second. I have them all open. I'm just trying to sift through them all. Which one was this one again?
The one I just talked about. I just kind of skimmed through it. I was just
asking, which one was it titled?
I sent it to you.
I found it.
This is from the National Association of Safety Professionals. I didn't know you could be a safety professional because I guess you can. Even though accidents happen to everybody.
I read through this one before, and to be honest, I mean, while it's mentioning the different stages of how collapse can will occur over the course of time, I've actually watched and seen a couple of movies and shows in preparation for this and this show, and I've actually kind of felt personally that depending on the large scale nature of the societal collapse, that the various stages of collapse may occur at a varying rate. For example, I'm going to compare a show to a movie that I've seen recently. Pete, I mean, I know you read the book, but have you been watching the series Under the Dome?
I watched the first 2 episodes, and I wanted to just gouge out my eyes because it was so not like the book. I normally like books, but, I'm okay with this stuff that's not like the movie, or, I'm sorry, not like the book, but it took such a deviation from it that I was like, I wasn't really interested. But, yeah.
That's what I've heard. My mom... That's what I've heard. My mom also read the book as well. And I haven't read the book yet. However, I'm going to watch the whole, the series first, and then afterwards I'm going to start reading the book. However, that compared to, so take this, if you aren't familiar with this series, it's based off of a Stephen King book. It's called Under the Dome. Essentially, there's a small town which becomes trapped under this large dome, and this dome's invisible. It's impenetrable. You can't hear through it, but light can still travel through it, and so this town is now its own independent. Not only is everything there an independent ecosystem, but the people have their own independent society now. It can't be accessed from inside or inside to outside. Communication really, for the most part, can't happen. And if you actually watch it, it kind of undertakes a much slower collapse, as Pete was mentioning. How first, everything turns to bartering first. How first you see people trading and trading commodities for other commodities. Then afterwards, there's a lot of dissent. There's a lot of political. I shouldn't say political. Alluding to political collapse. However, it's actually more of a power struggle. There's a certain faction. I'm not going to use precise details, but there's a certain faction, for example, that desires power over another one. And while the town government still does keep everything under control, there is no real crazy complete social or complete cultural collapse. It's actually more of it's actually more of, I would have to say this would be due to the fact that it's an isolated community that cannot, there is no escape. There's no, hey, let's travel away, try to find, a better place to go in these hard times or whatever. Now, on the other hand, the other comparison I was going to make to this was actually a lot more extreme. The stages of collapse occurred essentially all at once. Pete, have you ever read the book by Cormac McCarthy called The Road?
Oh, I am so happy that you just said those words. I absolutely love that book. It is actually one of my top 5 books of all time. And the movie was actually very close to the book and fantastic. It's actually,
I read the book years and years and years ago for a school project. And it's been so long, I can't remember details from the book, but just as a refresher, I watched the movie the other day, and it's truly a really amazing look into societal collapse. Even with, there's a lot of, it's essentially like the perfect book a high school teacher would want to have their class read. There's biblical allegories in it. There's religious symbolism, and a lot of metaphor in it. It's an amazing book. Essentially, I'm not going to give away the plot. It essentially revolves around a father and son who are trying to make it out of post-apocalyptic nation, and try to find a better place where they can survive and live, essentially.
I just gotta catch you, because the best part about that book is that it never ever tells you why that all happened.
Yeah. Oh yeah, precisely. It doesn't use a lot of details, and that's what I like about it. It remains very vague, but at the same time, it gives you the impression that, I would honestly want to say my best guess to be what would happen. It could be anything. My best guess would be some sort of apocalyptic nuclear war. The entire world is essentially stuck under 24/7 cloud cover. It's, very cold. It's very dark. And I mean, like I said, in contrary to, say, for example, Under the Dome, the biggest thing about it that I noticed is the fact that aside from, your family, whoever you're traveling with, and even then, you can't trust anyone. I noticed one thing that really struck me, is more over in the movie than even in the book, was the fact that whenever you came into contact with any sort of other creature at all, human, you heard a dog or something like that at all, you cannot trust them. You automatically already have your weapon out. And in worst case scenario, you have that weapon pointed at yourself. So, I mean, cannibalism is a big part of that. It's really. I mean, it's. I'm talking complete and total collapse. I mean, when I say cannibalism, that's what I associate with cultural collapse.
You know what? Actually, I had a theory about what happened in that world. I don't think it was nuclear attack or nuclear war. I actually think that it was global warming, or it was some sort of global weather disaster, maybe even even a meteor that struck the Earth, because just the sky is always dark. So, I mean, it could be a nuclear winter, and that is a possibility, but it also could have been just anything like a meteor, because I believe that if a meteor or a asteroid would strike the planet, it would kick up enough dust to pretty much blanket and cover the sky, so there would be like little to no sunlight and little to no visibility. But let's now that we're talking about that, let's talk about why. Or I'm sorry, actually finish your thought before I say this, because I get off track. Because after you finish your thought, I'll tease what's coming up next, and then we'll take a quick break.
Oh yeah, but anyway, The Road. I mean, like I said, it really strikes very, very fast the whole society class. I mean, if you watch the movie, it flashes back to the early times of the whatever whole crisis is going on, and there's one scene, for example, in which the father is seen preparing for this whatever upcoming disaster is. And, I mean, it's very sudden. He suddenly, rushes inside, fills the tub with water, runs to find his wife, all that kind of stuff. And it's and for the very brief time that they spend in hiding, as soon as they come out, I mean, like I said, I'm not going to give away the plot or what happens, but, I mean, you'd be very shocked by the things they find that human, quote-unquote, society has become. And, I mean, it's just astonishing to see how quickly the world just descends into complete and utter chaos, how everything is. And it's scary in a way. I mean, to think that our basic, the basic animalistic instincts of survival, the crazy, disgusting things that you see happening in the wild for basic animals to survive can be modified by our amount of how do I say this? The human intelligence, how all this can be modified by the human intelligence into something truly, I want to say, what's the word? Primal, feral, and how, I mean, for example, instead of seeing animals hunting animals, now you see humans hunting other humans for food. I mean, it's really, it's really shocking to say the least. Whereas, again, just one last contrast, and Under the Dome, while there is some dissent and unrest, politically the world remains relatively stable, and in addition to that, there's still, there's no mass murders going around. Essentially, in a small, closed society like that, you got to realize whoever has the most guns, whoever has the most power, is the person who's in charge. So that's just the comparison I wanted to make between how fast society can collapse in a different given situation.
Yeah. So let's just tease what we're going to talk about next. We're going to talk about what could cause this besides just really bad government, asteroids, zombies. In a worldwide pandemic, what could happen to destroy and unravel everything that we have so-called built? So we're going to take a quick, maybe about 4-minute break, and then we'll continue our discussion. And I'll leave this with another quick reminder. We have complete open lines unscreened. So if you're ever interested in calling up and sharing your opinion or sharing a story or sharing anything that you think is important about what things we talk about on this radio show, it has to do with the paranormal, the mysterious, the unexplained, the extraterrestrial, and the paranormal. Call in and check us out and share your story. This is a no judgment zone. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back on Phantom Nebula Radio. welcome back to Phantom Nebula Radio, the home of the unexplained, the paranormal, the supernatural, the extraterrestrial. And we're back talking about the collapse of civilization, more particularly America. And we're going to be talking about this portion about what scenarios could theoretically happen besides, America screwing up big time like we have been, and screwing the pooch, I guess it would be the correct term or incorrect term, and completely screwing us up and printing more money and all that stuff we talked about earlier when I was running around in circles and sounding like a like head cut off. We actually have a caller. I'm sure they can share their opinion. So we're going to go to the caller, and then we'll go back and continue our discussion. So welcome, caller. You're on Phantom Nebula Radio. Hello?
Hey.
How's it going?
Good.
Hello?
Good. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a lag there.
Yeah, it's okay.
But yeah, what I wanted to bring up, you just kind of mentioned about, is a paper note system, our currency being based around a paper note, and then basing that upon something backing it. But by continuing to print money beyond the amount of backing that we have, we're basically putting ourselves out on thin ice. And I've been saying it for a while, amongst friends and amongst just people that I talk to. I see America heading towards a post World War II Germany situation where their money was so useless that it was worth more to burn for fuel than it was to purchase anything.
Well, yeah, that's the trap. I mean, that's the trap that they have us in, is that we need to continue to have faith in their system, or else we are screwed. I mean, they'll be fine. They have enough power and wealth to amass resources or whatever they need to survive whatever collapse, and I'm sure they'll try and take power after that either. So I mean, whatever works for them. But this is where we get screwed, because when that becomes worthless, the common person is the one that gets screwed. And you're right. It'll happen to the point where we'll have to carry wheelbarrows to go to the store, because it'll be like post-World War I Germany during the Weimar Republic, where people, I think it was for $1 US at that time, it was, I'd like to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, to whoever, anyone in chat or Miguel, 3 trillion Reichsmarks, I believe it was.
I believe that was the currency back then. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So no, I definitely see that and it's not just being backed by nothing. It's the fact that when not only is it backed by nothing, but you just print it as you see fit. Oh, there's something going wrong with banks are failing and automotive companies aren't selling enough, so we need to bail them out. So let's just print more paper money. That's not the solution, because that's inflation. I mean, look. I mean, inflation is a natural thing, and yes, I do understand a natural thing, but hyperinflation is not a natural thing, and there are countries like Argentina where I don't know if you two are familiar with Argentina's financial crisis quite a bit ago. It was from in the late 90s, early 2000s, and pretty much the GDP crashed. A credit crunch happened. They defaulted on their foreign debt. Unemployment rose, and then pretty much they woke up, and the next day that their money was literally just toilet paper. So no, you hit the nail on the head. I'm glad. It's a dangerous situation, because people in America don't think that this could ever happen, and
it's a bread and circuses thing. It's like the Roman Empire. They have us so fooled. But check out the media. Check out what Miley Cyrus is doing. Check out, Obamacare. This is going to be good for you. Don't worry about it. Or Republicans will go and say, look, there's a war in Syria. Worry about that. There's terrorists over there. Let's think that they're terrorists over there. Even though those people created the Al Qaeda and those people we are supporting in Syria are terrorists. It's all smoke and mirrors and bread and circuses. They are distracting us from being concerned with A, their power grab, and B, the fact that the system is failing and their money will be worthless one day. So, that was awesome.
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead.
I think you spoke something very true there. Is the faith that's involved in the people. We as a people put way too much faith upon that system, and we're not worrying about our skills. We're worrying about how we're going to make more paper money. If paper money is useless, then it doesn't matter if we can go to a mill and run a machine, because the paper money that we'd be getting for that doesn't do anything. We don't have the bartering skills that pre-paper money people had. We don't have that necessarily the abilities as a civilization to work without this paper money idea.
It's just, I'm sorry, that came out a little ridiculous. But interestingly enough, I did read a book, and I will plant this book. It gets a little ridiculous at points. It does a lot of theory crafting, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate to a lot of things, and it gets very technical happy, because believe it or not, it's actually like a training guide, kind of disguised as a novel, with plot. So if you want to check it out, it's called Patriots: A Novel of Survival in the Coming Collapse. It's by an author called James Wesley Rawls. That's James Wesley Rawles. He's actually survivalist, and he actually does writes actual books that teach about it. But this is almost like a knowledge shoved into a plot. But yeah, he talked about all that stuff in that novel. It's a game to them, because either way they win, and we're just puppets to them. So I had a thought, and it flew away like a butterfly. So I'm not sure what I wanted to say after that. So Miguel, is there anything you had to add while we're on this? While we had a really good caller call in and give us a pretty cool topic thing to say.
No,
actually.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go on.
No, I was. Go ahead. I was just saying no. I thought that was just to me. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say that here, because I've always had very. I haven't exactly always had a very strong understanding of how our economic financial system works. However, I've always regardless been able to see as you're learning about it, you always see like the flaws in it. The fact that our country is essentially, run based on credit and the immense amounts of debt that we've collected. I mean, it's all that's actually one thing I'm going to mention eventually, Pete, is when we talk on our next topic about potential causes of collapse. That's one plausibility I want to bring up. However, I always allude to the fact that, as you mentioned, after World War I, Germany, essentially money was useless. And I mean, it's actually a very murky time period for me in Europe. However, to my understanding, I mean, most of Europe was hit even harder than we were in the Great Depression, and due to that, I mean, but like Pete mentioned, it takes a wheelbarrow of money just to simply buy a loaf of bread. Money is useless, and you have to. I would think that in a situation where society collapses, it would be very difficult to drill into the mindsets of everybody. The fact that you have to live on your own now. You have to figure out a way to get the commodities that you need. You need to be able to trade what you have for things that you need. And unfortunately, that's a really, really terrible thing for most people nowadays, because in order to trade something, you need to have a commodity in which you could produce. And nowadays, the production of commodities for trade has been, as we mentioned, replaced with money. Nowadays, it's not like you work as a blacksmith and you sell your wares, get money, and use that money to buy other things. No, you just directly trade your labor for money in which you use to acquire whatever it is that you need. And that being said, the majority of families in America who have, like I said, have nothing to produce, nothing to give, would essentially probably, end up starving or dehydrating or otherwise. They would be essentially without the government to support them. They would have nothing in order to go up to their neighbor with a well and say, hey, look, I'll give you, this, whatever it is that I can make in exchange for your water. And I feel like that would be, honestly, the biggest killer of most, I want to say, most suburban and urban people in America. Whereas out in the rural areas, like I said, you have people like my girlfriend's family, where they produce, out there you have, before they were a dairy farm, they got their milk from a neighboring dairy farm. And, they bought it from them, sure, but, granted, if money were useless, they could just trade them produce, trade them livestock, Out there, you could successfully barter and still keep some sort of, I don't want to say economy, but, I guess that's the closest word to it. You could keep some sort of economic system going. Whereas here, like I said, aside from labor, you have nothing to give, and labor isn't really necessary when you're just trying to survive. What are you going to have someone labor, to do for you,
Well, that's what's going to happen, though, when the collapse happens, is that when money starts to not be available as much, you'll find that companies that specialize in, say, oil production or bullet production or such and such will start beginning to pay their employees with their product, and that can only be sustained for so long. So that's actually just an interesting tidbit, because that's what happens in the book I had read, where it was nearing to a point where the guy was like, he's like, for your last paycheck, I'll pay you in oil drums. And the guy's like, sure. So, thanks for the call, Justin. I really appreciate it. So, thank you for calling in. And again,
absolutely.
If anyone else is interested in calling in, or if you have another thought, don't be hesitant to just post it in chat or whatever. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So let's go into the plausibility. Now this is the cool stuff, actually. This is the less, because I know this is a very politically laden episode, and that's fantastic, because I think it's important for people to know these things. But let's get into some of the cool, crazy stuff. So if you had to pick one scenario besides financial collapse, Miguel, that you thought was the most plausible thing for us to happen, for society to disappear, what would you think would happen?
To be completely honest, I would say nuclear war. While unlikely as it may be in today's geopolitical state, it was a very, very real possibility some 30, 40 years ago. So I believe that even with something like, as you mentioned, some sort of, environmental catastrophe, I feel like the biggest societal collapse would more likely than not be caused by ourselves. It doesn't even necessarily have to be nuclear war. It could be, it could be, foreign invasion. It could be alien invasion. But for example, I think we talked about it a while ago. You played the game Homefront, correct?
I played a little bit of it. I wasn't a fan.
I played it very briefly. It was a very short story. I feel it was the most far-fetched national.
Yeah, okay.
North Korea somehow takes over the majority of the Orient area and somehow manages to use all that power within a span of like 10 years to unify everyone and have them all invade America with technology that not only rivals but surpasses our own.
Without America
what was that?
Jumping in and before that could all happen.
Yeah, I know. So, but yeah, apparently, new North Korean leaders like, hey, South Korea, I know you hate us and all, but here, come join us. But anyway, back to what I was saying though. Homefront was essentially a non-nuclear foreign invasion in which society did take a rather large downturn. While foreign invaders do try to keep order, at that point, as we mentioned, our dollar becomes useless. We're under foreign occupation now. It's a situation where the foreign invaders aren't going to supply us with the commodities that we need to survive, like the government would. That's if you're assuming the government would even do that in the first place. I know after certain things like Hurricane Katrina that there's a big thing about how the government took forever to respond and blah blah blah. But that's beside the point. But I feel that either foreign invasion, nuclear war, or like I said, even something like alien invasion would be the greatest cause of societal collapse. Greatest possible, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Personally, I think I would tend to agree with you when you're talking nuclear war, but I just can't think of a nation that would go to nuclear war with us. I guess it could happen where, as if it was like maybe a mistake where they started fighting between themselves.
Well, I feel that's actually a very, very real possibility. Did I tell you the story of, I believe the guy's name was like Stanislav Petrov or something like that? I don't know, some Russian guy back in like the early 90s.
Pretty much the one that prevented the nuclear war is what you're saying?
Right, yeah. Long story short, that he was working in a bunker. He was in command, installed new software, which then said, oh, hey, there's a missile incoming, which then said, hey, there's 2-3 missiles incoming. And then he decided to think and say, because the automatic protocol is by the time that that you can confirm them, by the time that they're over the horizon and invisible, it's already too late. At that point, you won't be able to retaliate fast enough. So his thing was, well, let's wait and see if they're real, or let me chalk it up to a software malfunction and see if it's and see if this is just a mistake. Turns out it was a software malfunction. Otherwise, he would have launched ballistic missiles at the United States, and we would have ended up launching ours in return, and nuclear war would have happened.
Me and you probably would have never been born.
Oh, no, not at all.
So I would have to say, if I was going to choose something, I feel that mine probably would be some sort of biological attack. Actually, anywhere between biological attack or just a pandemic in general. I find that a disease is much quicker killer because if you say, even if you just launch a few nukes, I'm sure it could blight the country, but a disease you can't really avoid as much. I guess I'm trying to explain it. And it's much easier to create and get a hold of because nuclear materials to create a bomb are very, very, very much monitored by the watchdog agencies, the UN, America, the NSA, CIA, et cetera, So it's much easier to get a team of microbiologists and such to create, modify rabies, modify Ebola. Unfortunately for us, I don't think it's actually possible to modify Ebola to be an airborne form because the disease burns itself out so fast. All of the Ebola outbreaks have pretty much burnt out before they could spread any longer, like the same with the Marburg virus. But there is the possibility that a modified flu virus or a actual flu virus, because the flu has killed millions of people in the past. Look at the Spanish flu. Killed more people than World War I. So it is much easier for a terrorist cell to get a hold of biological chemical weapons than it would be to, say, get a hold of a bomb. But and it's harder to make a nuclear warfare. So if a bomb, sorry, not nuclear warfare. So I do think your scenario would be plausible, absolutely, because we have no idea what Iran is doing. We have no idea if Russia has truly disarmed a lot of it. I know they still retain a lot. But the thing that does lean a little bit more in your favor is that they do have nukes that just went up and went, no. And actually, Andy just messaged me. Conventional warfare, he said, is the most likely. Believe it or not, conventional warfare probably won't happen in the next few decades because conventional warfare is so costly, and most countries can't sustain a long conventional war, except America, China, America and its NATO allies, Russia, China. And if there was a conventional war between China and America, it would cause a financial collapse before it would cause a giant global conflict, because America and China can never fight each other because we are so linked. So that's why the whole posturing with Taiwan kind of just always peters out, because they just kind of go, oh, well, there's no way we can fight each other. So, what do you think about disease? I think that a disease actually is scarier than nuclear warfare, because you don't know if someone has it. Like, you could just shake hands with someone, or someone could sneeze on you, and then that's it.
Well, at the same time that I think a disease would be more lethal for the average person, I feel that a disease, granted, societal collapse would be a side effect of such a global catastrophe. However, I feel something like a pandemic would rather cause the complete and total destruction of the human race. Something that large in general would, I feel, create the total and complete destruction of the human race before it would cause the collapse of society. For example, I really don't. That's always my big that's always been my big belief about, like, say, for example, zombie scenarios, like world collapse, world being overrun by a pandemic of that nature. I feel would actually not only cause a collapse society, but also then cause the deaths of most of, if not all, of the human race. I feel that would cause. If granted, let's assume few pockets of survivors who were genetically immune to said pandemic could survive. I feel it would be a very isolated scenario where, honestly, societal collapse in that environment, I don't think would even really be able to be understood in its traditional sense. Like we said, the whole people bartering and hunting each other and having to live on the land. I feel in that case, such pockets of survivors would be so few and far apart that you would actually see. You would rather, instead of how society has collapsed, you'd rather be able to study how the individuals survive, which may seem like it's one and the same thing. However, we're looking at people who are probably, like I said, so far and few apart that there's virtually no interaction between each other. I feel that that a human who would be able to survive would essentially be on their own, and essentially for maybe years at a time before they're able to run into another human survivor who's also immune. I feel that in that case, that's probably the most likely scenario.
Well, yeah, if a good book to read about this actually is The Stand by Stephen King. It talks about a super flu called Captain Trips that wipes out most of humanity. And if I had to explain it, it's like a post-apocalyptic Lord of the Rings, because it's a very traditional good versus evil storyline, and without giving it away, Superflu, Captain Trips wipes out society. There are immune people, but they begin to split into two groups, good, evil, and they congregate in two areas, and it's really, really cool. But the way Stephen King wanted to do it was like a post-apocalyptic Lord of the Rings. But if anyone wants to check out a really cool novel about a societal collapse because of a pandemic, that would be one. and I can't remember off the top of it for the life of me, but I read a whole book about the Spanish flu, which was really interesting, and talking about how much further we've come to combat pandemics, but even then there are still holes in the system. So with that, real quick, we're going to take another quick break, and then after we come back, we're going to talk about I'd like to run through a little bit more of the other scenarios, and then we're going to take a quick look, and we'll go through a scenario of societal collapse, and me and Miguel will kind of go back and forth and talk about how what we're going to do with different situations, and maybe some tips, and maybe, who knows, it might even help you. So, if you want to call in again, the number is 714-364-4734. Unscrewed open lines. And here is a break. And thank you for listening to Dark Matter Radio. And we're back, everybody. Welcome back to the last about 40 minutes of Dark. Almost caught myself there. I'm so used to it. Phantom Nebula Radio. We're continuing to talk about the collapse of society and what would happen, and we're going to be talking about a few of the scenarios of what could happen and what could cause it, and then we're going to go ourselves. We're going to run through the scenario and maybe give you some tips because of what could happen. But as we're actually joined by one of our other old co-hosts for the show, who's been quite busy lately, so me and Miguel have pretty much been holding up the hosting duties. If you did watch Dark Matter Radio, you do remember Andy. Welcome, Andy. It's good to have you.
Hey, what's up?
So where'd you catch us at?
When did I start listening?
Yeah.
It was around I actually started paying attention around I think when you had a caller in for about the economic collapse bit, which you know me and my opinions on that I got grumpy about.
Well, hyperinflation is a danger for any country, especially when
it can happen. It's just as long as we have good safeguards and like somebody intelligent in the Treasury, it should not happen. The issue is, of course, somebody intelligent being in the Treasury.
Well,
and our politicians not doing dumb things.
Do you know who Peter Schiff is?
No, I don't. I probably should know that.
Peter Schiff was a businessman and a financial strategist and stuff. He was the one who called the housing bubble and such like that to happen. He predicted it before it was going to happen, and then no one believed him. He actually talked about hyperinflation. So if you want, I can send that. If I can send you the article and you can check out his.
Yeah, go ahead and send that to me. I'll probably try to read it sometime tomorrow in between classes or something.
So, all right. So you were talking to me about how you think a society would probably collapse. Do you think it would go about differently from what we described, or do you think that it would be almost the same, if not close?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, societies are going to collapse in relatively the same way. And what we can use is historical examples and just a general understanding of how people function in political situations and in groups, and what makes us obey these political rules and acknowledge government, and what makes us stop. So, I mean, you'd want to look to things like the government itself collapsing, which you guys have probably already gone through all this general stuff. So I'll probably go to a more specific thing in just a second. But looking at the government collapsing itself, economies collapsing, obviously, because that can happen. And it can cause governments to fall, just a variety of different things. Conventional warfare is a very likely cause for a society to collapse or a government to collapse. Obviously, a severe enough natural disaster could do it. And as you guys keep hinting on, is that because of the way our modern society is structured, we are in some sense vulnerable to a lot of these problems. And I actually am learning about, people's perceptions of these problems in one of my classes right now. It's the study of personal security, the psychology of personal security. It's very fascinating. I'm reading a book by a man named Sagarin called Learning from the Octopus. The man's a biologist, and he studies adaptability and defense mechanisms of animals and how they adapt to natural disasters or changes in the environment, how the government and we as a society and we as a people can sort of steal these things and their adaptability mechanisms to lessen the effects of economic collapses, wars, things like that. So it's not all doom and gloom, thankfully, but even I have to acknowledge there's a degree of vulnerability.
You touched on something that I actually, while you touched on it, I actually want to bring up, is that we are particularly vulnerable to something like this happening, and people would have no idea how to react. Well,
yes.
I think it would be wrong for me to say nobody, but I think it's safe to generalize and say most people wouldn't know how to react because we are so most of us have lived with electricity, we have lived with running water, we have lived with not knowing where our food comes from, just going to the supermarket and purchasing said food. We've lived with all that. So if you took all that away, you took away electronics and everything like that, no one would have any idea what to do. And I would say that there are people who would adapt. There are people who would adapt and understand, but then there are two other groups of people. There are people who would snap and join the ranks of the murderers and rapists and stuff like that, people who would just go crazy and just not understand how to deal with it. And then there are people who would just probably die and shut because they would just give up and they have because they're like, well, society's over with and I can't make it, so I'm either going to kill myself or just die. Would I be accurate in saying that?
I definitely say those are the three main groups. Off the top of my head, with absolutely no preparation, I wouldn't really be able to divide it any further. You would also see, since I hate to use the video game Fallout as an example, but you would see remnants of government and order. It just would not have the same reach, the same effect, the same power, same resources. You would see that. But as far as people actually joining the side of like murderers and criminals, as we would call it today, that's a very interesting one to look at.
You want me to explain it? What I meant?
Yeah, you might want to explain what you meant, just to make sure I'm hitting on the right spot here.
If I'm correct, I'm not a psychology major. I only had to take medical psychology when I was in college. So, is it not true that a lot of serial killers blend into society and are normal members of society? Like, say, Ted Bundy was a pretty good-looking, well-spoken man and lived a pretty decent life. So wouldn't it be unfeasible that there would be people who are forced to cohere with society and take their activities elsewhere at night and so, that once all those restraints are removed and society no longer can contain them anymore and the government is no longer big enough for them to have to obey, laws don't matter anymore, so why do you have to obey the laws anymore? So those people would come out of their shells and join the ranks of people that, say, are being let go of prison or escaping prison. That's what I meant.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's definitely a good assessment. Yeah, most people who are, the old term is psychopath. We have a different term for it now, but I don't remember it, to be honest. I took abnormal psychology early in, sophomore year of college, so I barely remember anything about the really crazy stuff. But, yeah, I would say, generally speaking, most of our characteristic serial killers tend to be extremely charming, charismatic in a very superficial way. They either tend to be well-liked by naive people or they tend to give the more perceptive people the creeps. That has been my observation. For example, H.H. Holmes. But that's getting into a different topic I don't want to get into because I don't want to get us too far away from society.
We're gonna do an entire topic on serial killers.
I need to be there for that. I'll have to go back through my old textbooks.
I'm not sure if you guys. I'm going to go completely off track for just 1 minute, so please bear with me. How would you feel about doing maybe even a 3 or 4 hour show on serial killers, a long show? Because that's a topic that
depends on the day.
Oh, a day that would be acceptable, acceptable for everybody. But I think that's just a topic you just can't get done in 2 hours, even one. But back to it, Miguel. Do you think that do you think that our accurate description, or I'm sorry, I can't call it accurate because it's not 100% proven. Do you think our description of how society would split and what would happen to people? Do you think that's how you would see it? And it's just a scary thought, a bunch of murderers running around out of prison.
To be honest, I think in a way it would split in such a way that for a while I feel that it would be, essentially an every man for himself kind of scenario. Eventually, for a while it would be like, each individual, family surviving, kind of trying to hunker down, prepare for the worst, care about their own interests. And I feel it would take some time before you would start to have groups of, say, gangs and clans or such, whatever you want to call them, roaming around and starting to take control. It's always kind of been that way historically. It's always kind of been that little, that political, I shouldn't say political, but societal structure begins from the ground up. And I feel like, actually alluding to a scene from The Road, you will eventually start to see gangs of militia just, roaming around, trying to find any food they can, killing people for whatever they have. Another one, you may see people, you may start to see people, starting to hunt other people for, to cannibalize them for food. And I feel, as gruesome as it may sound, even a large group of people may consent to such activities in order to simply survive. You might say that, as larger groups, gangs, militias may form, that eventually you start to get the workings of a very primitive, small, local society. However, I still don't think that this would stop such a lot of very heinous, primal, gruesome things from happening in order to guarantee their own survival.
Yeah, it's just a scary thought. So if there, actually, Andy, once you were trying to talk to me, and it was hard for me to take your thoughts on messages to translate them to them. So what do you think would be the most likely scenario in which this all could possibly have happened?
Well, I guess it would be important to say, do you just mean a general societal collapse, or I think that's actually another important thing to bring up is what degree of collapse? Because there's going to be total collapse, there's going to be partial collapses, temporary collapse, things like that.
Total social, cultural, political, commercial, and financial collapse. Complete.
So as if basically what we see like in Fallout and The Road and other stuff like that.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, man. Well, there's something I really want to bring up first. It's a psychology thing related to judgment and value. I can't. For some reason, I can remember the terms for these. I just remember that they're things. We tend to rate things that are low in probability, that are really scary, like plane crashes and stuff, as being a lot higher in probability than they actually are. And things that are high in probability but aren't scary, we tend to rate as lower. It's kind of a weird thing. So that's something I want to point out is, when I'm saying these, I want to point out they're extremely low in probability. Just because something can happen doesn't mean it's highly probable or even likely. It's just a thing. Because I don't want people to get scared. It's something to be aware of, but not worry over. But as far as the most likely thing, I would say probably one of them I'm going to go with is a conventional war. As we have seen by the Iraq and Afghanistan war, we can barely afford to fight a war for 10 years against, two different countries with a insurgency. That's an issue, because imagine fighting a actual power. That would probably be more likely to, as Pete mentioned, I believe, is produce an economic collapse rather than a societal collapse, which could trigger other things. And obviously the other one that was mentioned was the biological one, because I'm actually a huge proponent of controlling biological weapons. Nuclear weapons I'm not really worried about. It takes a high level of expertise to use them. So biological weapons and a biological warfare or a pandemic are probably the next more likely ones. But with a pandemic, you're probably not going to see, depending on the extent of it, you're probably not going to see as much of a bounce back. An economic collapse from a conventional war, you could see a bounce back. You could see that country come back in 40, 50 years, and possibly even sooner. The Weimar Republic came back within approximately 25 years. and then became Nazi Germany. I mean, they ended up not doing so well either, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, no, it's possible to bounce back from partial collapses, but a total societal collapse has never happened in the modern day. So, I'm talking about like Roman Empire stacked, Mayan Empire falls apart, full complete destruction of everything that happened. So, what we're going to do is, since there's not many other scenarios that we could probably touch on besides the alien invasion. So actually, let's talk about that. I mean, that's an interesting thing. I think that could because this actually is a pretty cool thing that we could probably dedicate an entire show to. But it was Stephen Hawking that warned us about SETI. That listening is okay, but broadcasting is wrong. So, you think that it's a scary thought that we could be broadcasting. Hey, here we are. Look, we're not a Type 1 civilization. We're vulnerable. We could be easily conquered. Come, steal our resources if you've exhausted your resources on your world. I think, Miguel, you actually touched up on something like that when I think we had SETI at one point that you think that, do you think it's dangerous that we're broadcasting and listening?
I mean, honestly, at this point, I absolutely think that that there are dangers that we must start to consider that we really haven't really even acknowledged. I mean, granted, we assume that if a race is advanced enough to be able to receive and our communications and travel across the galaxy in order to contact us. I mean, I think so far we've just pretty much assumed that they're going to be, they're going to be benign in terms of, in terms of their relation to us. However, I really don't think we should be so quick to jump the gun on something like that. I mean, I really do think that there may be the possibility that, and it's been covered in multiple movies. I mean, what was the one? There was one very recently with Tom Hanks. What am I saying? Tom Cruise. I don't remember the name of it. But
did he run away? Did he run away from an explosion? Actually, no. In this one, I don't believe he did. No, in fact, I think one he actually did not run away from the explosion. However, I'm not going to give away the details about the movie. But it was very recent. It involved, world collapse based on aliens who were essentially draining us for our resources. And there's many movies. I mean, honestly, if you want to imagine societal collapse in the wake of an alien invasion, I would be most. I want to say likely to associate with that sort of scenario with War of the Worlds. I feel H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds book was actually probably the most likely kind of setup for such an alien invasion. I feel that there's also there's also a couple others. Harry Turtledove wrote a short story about an alien race. In fact, I mentioned it a couple shows ago. An alien race that came and strip mined the Earth and essentially treated us like slaves. But to be honest, in the case of an alien invasion, I feel that societal collapse would be very rapid and very violent, and that honestly, like I mentioned earlier with the pandemic, I don't really think there would be much societal collapse to happen after very long. I feel that after a while, the only humans left would be in small little pockets. I feel the human population would be dwindled down to only only a handful of people in across the entire globe. I feel that if an alien race truly came here, to take and destroy our resources, that we'd have no planet left to live on in the first place, and B, that that if they're here to exterminate us and live here, that honestly, if they're advanced enough to travel as far in the first place, we probably don't have all that much chance of surviving against their technology anyway. There's one more thing I was going to mention about that. Well, there's actually a book that I would suggest everyone to read because it's actually pretty cool. It's called The Killing Star by Charles Pellegrino, and it pretty much takes place in the late 21st century. Everything's great. You know, we have nanomachines. They create enormous cities. We have artificial habitats in planets. We have antimatter starships, and then all of a sudden, relativistic missiles. Pretty much they're just hunks of metal. If you know what a relativistic missile is, cool. If not, they're pretty much you just take anything and hurl it at relativistic speeds, and pretty much since you're hitting it so fast, it actually almost creates the whole force of like many nuclear weapons. So pretty much they wipe out humanity. I won't kind of give you up about what happens in between them, but pretty much the reason why was because they had to kill us before we could kill them. We're advancing, and we were just too dangerous to have around, so they needed to wipe us out before we did that to them. I think that is probably the most likely scenario. That it would be it wouldn't be like Independence Day where we, it would be more like. Andy, did you read The Forever War? Did you read that? I think you did.
Yes, it was amazing. I loved it. I loved that novel. It was great.
I think the most two likely scenarios for alien contact and conflict would be either The Killing Star or The Forever War. Do you actually want to talk about it forever? Do you want to just mention it real quick, a blurb about what it's about, and then actually we'll go to a break, and then we'll come back and do a little bit of a small scenario, and then that'll be it for the evening?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I read it, so let's make sure I hit on the good key point here. So The Forever War is about this contact between humanity and a alien species, which is I don't remember how well they describe it in the book at all for some reason. I think the general idea is that we're not really able to communicate with them very well, which
exactly
is a principal theme of the book is a lack of communication between our species and theirs. And essentially, the reason it's called the Forever War is because it lasts for so long. The soldiers that have to travel between battlefields, it takes hundreds and hundreds of years for them to reach from point A to point B. And in that time, technology's progressed. Because of time dilation. Technology progresses. The people that were commanding them are long dead, and new people are, new officers are taking over the war and things like that. And I believe the war lasts, several thousand years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then that ends up leading into the resolution of the book, which I'm not going to ruin because you need to read it for yourself. But that's the general principle, is that a lack of communication ends up becoming this long and drawn-out war. And it's realistic. I mean, it really draws on some realistic as it can be. But, it draws on real science, the idea of time dilation, issues that you would have with fighting a war in space across many different solar systems and fighting in different planets, logistical issues. It addresses it, and it does it in a very entertaining way, and almost chilling, just how good it is.
Actually, interesting enough fact, it's actually getting made into a movie by Ridley Scott, so that should be an interesting thing.
Oh, that and Ender's Game. I'm going to be a happy kid.
Harrison Ford, that's all I got to say. Miguel, you said you had a quick thought before we went to break?
Yeah, the what I was going to say that I forgot before, though, was in reference to that to the Harry Turtledove short novel that I mentioned. Another likely scenario that I believe would be possible for an alien invasion would essentially be a collapse of society that involves us living as essentially as slaves or as a subspecies to the occupying species. Like I mentioned in the Turtledove book, the aliens were strip mining our planet, which in turn resulted in it was a very lengthy process, obviously. So, while many countries were completely destroyed through the mining procedure, there were large areas of land where humans still lived, governed by the invading species. And I feel that being treated as sort of like a I don't want to say subhuman, but sub-alien race, a lesser race, we would essentially be treated either as pets, as as just wild animals even, or as slaves, And I feel that in that case, if we were governed in such a way, I mean, they may not even give two craps about us, where we could result in where I mean, we could just simply result in having to form our own societies. I mean, it could still end up being a collapse of society, in that we would all be on our own because our quote unquote alien overlords really don't give two craps about us. But that's all I really had to mention. I just forgot to say that before.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a thing. If anyone likes Turtle, definitely check them out. So we're just going to take a quick few-minute break, and then we'll come back, run through a scenario, and that'll be it. Thank you for joining us on Fandom Number 8 Radio. See you in a few minutes. And welcome back again. That was just a quick break. We have about 17 minutes left in the program. Again, we are unscreened open lines. That means that if you are interested in calling up and checking us out and sharing your opinion or sharing your story, anything from the paranormal, the supernatural, the extraterrestrial, the mysterious, the unexplained, the guest call-in number is 714-364-4734. I just want to talk about now. We'll go through a scenario of societal collapse and maybe kind of give a few tips or maybe what we would do. So don't either of you just go bear with me and just so you wake up and you go to turn on the news and you see the government's shutting down and pretty much the stock market has crashed, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go into any crazy details. So pretty much the shit's hitting the fan. Would you see if it worked out or not, or would you start really considering that maybe something's important and we need to get ready and start preparing and making my arrangements.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll go first. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, actually, I don't believe I mentioned this. That my dad is very into survivalism. He has been ever since, honestly, probably ever since about the time we did our survivalism show back a couple of seasons ago. And to be completely honest, I mean, unless I have some physical evidence right before me, I mean, I would just take everything very cautiously. I wouldn't, and I've always been like that as a personal thing, whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, you be the judge of that. But, like, for example, that's another thing we need to talk about, speaking of which, is Superstorm Sandy. Before Sandy, I mean, I remember the whole thing was, it's going to be so terrible, it's going to be so terrible, and the same thing with Irene the year before. And, I mean, honestly, I really took it very, very lightly, and luckily we weren't hit. We didn't receive any damage, but I take all news lightly, and it'd be a while before I would actually start making preparations for, the worst.
I'm not sure if you caught that, Andy, but we were talking about if you woke up and you saw that the stock market collapsed and it looked like hyperinflation has finally come, and you don't have a job anymore because they can't pay you and your school closed. Well, would you start really immediately making preparations and calls and such, or do you think you could just wait to see if it blows over?
I mean, in my present situation, I would get up, I would leave where I'm at now and go back home to South Carolina. But assuming I was in South Carolina when it happened, I probably would do my thing there. I know people a lot more intimately there, and my support systems are more deeply seated there. Here, I mean, I know good people, but it's an urban city. If I was, provided society is collapsing or in the process of, I wouldn't want to be in an urban environment.
I mean, not New Jersey.
It's big. It's a safety risk. I think rural areas are much safer in that sort of situation.
Oh, okay. Now that I think about it, that we completely glossed over something, and I said that we would get to it later on in the program, but apparently I have the memory of goldfish. Those of you who are tuning in who lived in New York, the Tri-State area, me and Miguel are from the toxic pit known as New Jersey. So we were mostly affected by Hurricane Sandy. So we actually kind of lived through a semi-crazy time where it's starting to seem like a societal collapse, if not partial, not full. So Miguel, why don't you talk about what you wanted to?
Well, the whole Hurricane Sandy thing, like I mentioned, there was Hurricane Irene the year before, and sorry about that. Anyway, Hurricane Irene was supposedly going to be a very, very bad incident. Supposedly, Hurricane Irene, I mean, there was supposed to be crazy flooding. It was going to be terrible. Everyone had to evacuate the town. It was supposedly, homes were going to be lost. You could die if you don't evacuate. Yet when Irene blew over, literally, it really wasn't all that much. We got a little bit of, actually we got quite a lot of rain, a little bit of wind. My furnace room flooded a little bit. That was about it, though. There was really no physical damage to any houses in Union Beach. That being said, the following year, Hurricane Sandy came around, and when Sandy came, I mean, based on Irene the year before, many people really, really took the whole warnings of evacuation and this and that really, really lightly. Granted, we had a whole day to see how bad it really was before it really got bad at night and actually, evacuate. However, it supposedly coincided with a supermoon, and it supposedly hit us at such a way that it caused a lot more damage than Irene would have. However, I mean, it was crazy to see how long we were without power for. I think power outages of that length in today's day and age are very, 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 very rare. I mean, I honestly wish I could give you an exact figure, but I mean, I want to say it was either a little over a week or a little under a week that we went without power.
In Irene.
I mean, no, not in Irene, in Sandy.
Well, I mean, yeah, a lot of people had power for a little less than a week, but there are people who didn't have power for almost a month.
Oh, yeah.
And
oh, yeah.
I think I'd like to point out, though, while you're saying that, is that I think that's interesting. We could take a lot away from that Sandy lesson, is that how fragile our power system is, at least in New Jersey and at least in this area, is that, I mean, literally in at least my portion of New Jersey, a squirrel farts on a power line and it goes down for the day. You know, these things are so ancient that our infrastructure is so aging and downtrodden that anything could even just completely just knock it over with like a strong breeze. So I think Sandy highlighted a lot of mistakes that were made. Coming from an emergency services standpoint, I was an EMT during that time, so I saw how crazy it was. It was just radios were getting knocked out, so it was very hard to communicate. People were getting stuck, et cetera, et cetera. It was just crazy, and it gave us it was just an insane time, and it caused the second most damage of any hurricane ever in terms of cost. Andy is a southerner, so he is familiar with hurricanes, but I guess
yep.
Now, so you guys are probably a lot more prepared with hurricanes than we are, I would assume, correct?
Pretty much. I mean, I'm a veteran at this point. If you told me a category such and such hurricane is coming in so many days, I know exactly what to do. I know where to go. I know what to buy. I know where not to be. I have a decent idea of what kind of houses I would want to be in immediately. Because hurricanes are, I've just grown up with them. I mean, when I was younger, it's important to point out South Carolina has not had a direct hit from a major hurricane since Hugo in '89, and that was before my time.
So you guys haven't had a Sandy
we haven't had
event like we had.
Too many bad ones since I was a kid. We had maybe 2 bad ones when I was young, but I know the general idea because they go over it every year. When I was at school in high school, we went over it every year. My mom lived through a couple. My dad did. My entire family knows how it runs, so I just know. And our infrastructure is designed to. I don't want to say designed, but our infrastructure has been built in such a way that it is easier for it to survive up to probably a Category 3 or 4 hurricane and be easily fixable. 5s are just so destructive that there's not much you can do because of all the flooding and rainwater, and I can even spawn tornadoes, which is the huge danger of like a really bad hurricane is tornadoes. People forget about that. Like, that's the worst thing. You got all this stuff happening. Then a tornado. Yes, hurricanes and natural disasters are bad.
Yeah, see, well, the thing with Sandy was when that happened was we had Sandy, and then what was it, like a week later, Miguel, we got like a foot of snow dumped on us.
I was so frightened when I heard about that happening. I felt so bad for the people that didn't have electricity. Something sort of like that happened with Hugo in '89, if I remember correctly. Hugo wrecked everything, and then like a week or 2 later, they had a blizzard. Like, it was really strange.
They call it a superstorm.
You can still see effects from it today.
Well, there will be long-lasting effects. Like one of the hardest hit. We have all these barrier islands, which were very dumb of people to build and live on, and then there are people who chose not to to stay on them. But Seaside Heights, one of the big communities that was really affected by a storm, just actually they rebuilt their boardwalk, and half of it just burnt down in a giant fire. So,
wow, that's awful.
And there are still long-lasting effects. Personally, my aunt and uncle live in a shore town, and their house flooded during Sandy, and they've had nothing but problems with their flood insurance company giving them the money, and they still haven't gotten their money from it. It's been an absolute disaster.
I'm not surprised.
They have volunteers and my uncle himself working on the repairs of the house because they literally just have not gotten to them. So, look, just from that minor hurricane, we can see lessons of how much we're woefully unprepared for any scenario like this. People are woefully unprepared themselves. The government's woefully unprepared. FEMA's not very, very good to trust. So, I think that people, those of you who are listening, really need to think about what you would do in that situation. Or what would happen if everything just suddenly got up and we did not work anymore. Your electricity, your gas, money wasn't worthless. You didn't know where to get food. You don't own a gun because you don't believe in a gun, but you're gonna have to learn how to get one. Arm yourself really fast. So, do you have anybody have any closing comments?
Oh yeah, Pete. I was actually going to ask if I could just go a little bit more into detail because I see we have about 8-9 minutes left.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And what actually the town was like in the aftermath of Sandy.
Yeah,
if that's right by you.
Yeah, go ahead. Just take a few minutes, and then I'll wrap it up, and I'll tell everybody about tomorrow.
Well, I was actually going to say, what happened was during the morning of Sandy, the water, it hit the town like a brick. I remember by night we lost power, and I do vividly remember walking around town, and luckily my block is one of the few areas that is actually outside of a flood zone in this town.
Right.
And I have friends whose houses got 14 feet of water. And I remember walking less than a block in each direction and finding water. We were actually essentially isolated from the mainland because all the creeks and little rivers that go throughout Union Beach have all flooded over and flooded intersections that were more inland than I was. That being said, by the time the next day came around, all you saw was streets literally covered in debris. There were houses that were half a mile away from where they were the night before. People were without homes. At this point, what was it called? I remember it was actually just the following morning that the police and fire department arrived and started taking care of things. And I remember the roads leading up to the water were all completely closed off. I remember, unless you lived down there, you weren't allowed down there at all because the damage was so bad. They were afraid of looters. They were afraid of people trying to scavenge stuff there. We actually the lines at the gas stations, the ones that were still around anyway, were so bad that actually I don't think any gas stations were really actually hit by the storm. But all the lines at the gas station were absolutely terrible. There was no thought in your mind at all to go and get gas. We actually had to call Amber's sister and her boyfriend to come bring us gas down from Pennsylvania so that we could still get around. It was that bad. I remember at night there was a curfew enforced. Essentially, it was almost like martial law. There was a curfew. The only cars you'd see driving around every 15 minutes or so would be a cop car. It was so eerily dark and quiet outside at night, yet during the day, all you saw was nothing but people walking around. I guess nobody knew what to do, where to go. It was just, there was looting going on during the storm. There were several stores in Keyport who had their windows smashed and a lot of stuff taken from them. Supposedly there were people going around, through people's yards and stuff. Everyone was afraid of a home invasion or something of that nature. But personally, myself, I didn't see anyone. I didn't see anyone walking around after dark. The town, the police really held everything together very well. All in all, it wasn't as bad of a collapse as you might have really thought. People still got by on what they had. Kept your refrigerator closed unless you absolutely needed to. Cooked food that you could store in your pantry, or maybe one thing out of the freezer at night. We still have gas powered stoves working. Still had running water. It was essentially just a time just to settle down and wait for everything to blow over. But at the same time, it was eerie, though, seeing how lifeless the town, really could be after that. Granted, if it weren't for the fear of going out and getting arrested after being out past a certain time, I would have been afraid of going out and getting mugged after a certain time. The trail, the Henry Hudson Trail, is essentially all unmonitored. there's always been rumors and stories of people getting mugged on the trail, even during good times. I mean, imagine how someone trying to walk home after dark could, what could happen to them. I mean, this is during the early winter too, so I mean, or late fall. So I mean, there weren't that many hours of daylight,
Yeah, I
remember one day. Yeah, go on.
I remember going to work and it being crazy because I was allowed out being an emergency worker, so you could see, but the roads are completely empty, and then on the way back, the gas, even on the parkway, was that mob, but I got away with it because being an emergency worker, I need to get back and forth and everything. They let me get gas, but I have 3 minutes left, so I just want to call it and do some wrapping up and kind of tease everybody tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, enjoying our lengthy discussion on the collapse of society, particularly America, what would happen, what scenarios, and what would cause it. Tune in tomorrow for a really, really great show. I'm very excited to be a part of. We're gonna start a series on famous hauntings and famous places that are haunted, such as Gettysburg and such. But tomorrow night is going to be on the Amityville Horror. If you're not familiar with it, I'm not. You will be soon after tomorrow night, and it'll be a doozy of a show. So, thank you for tuning in, and remember, we have unscreened open lines, meaning you can call in tomorrow, and you're welcome to share your haunting stories. That would be excellent. I am completely okay with it getting derailed by people sharing their personal stories about hauntings and ghosts and such. That would be prime amazement for me, but thanks for tuning in. Like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Phantom Nebula Radio, and also check us out on YouTube at the same YouTube, but with the Phantom Nebula link, where you can download our shows and check us out off of there. Besides Blog Talk Radio, so thank you for tuning in, and it's great to be back to radio. I'm really, really having a blast. There are people in chat already saying that they're gonna. So please tune in tomorrow at 9:30 Eastern. So as I bid you farewell from the lovely, lovely state of New Jersey, play a little bit of music before we leave. Good night, everybody.